So I thought today we would go over the steps that we need to go through when we have a transaction.
Awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes, sometimes it seems like maybe we forget
To do what?
the steps that we need to go through when we get
What'd you
to do
do?
a transaction. So we'll go over that
Did you
today.
do something?
No, I said sorry because I feel like I'm listening to you and I look like I'm not.
Because you guys are kind of like half working, half listening.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do have this this sheet that we all have available to us that helps us kind of keep on track with the transaction. We just call it repping a seller, really representing, right? I just kind of was using slang, but it's when we represent a seller. And so I want to kind of go through this again. And if we feel like we need to amend it and change it around, we can definitely amend it. And then we'll turn it into a PDF so that everybody can have a copy of it. Let me get everybody in the room coming in. There's Randy. All right, excellent. So first thing we do, so this is when we're representing a seller. So there's one of these also for a buyer, but it's basically just like a mirrored copy of this, more or less. It's some slightly different things when you represent a buyer than when you represent a seller. So what's the first thing that we should do when we're representing a seller when we, you know, I can do this. Let me try, I'm gonna try something here.
Did
I
you
think I
booted
can
me
put
out?
a shape in here.
What? We're getting up way too close.
What's his name, Randy?
Unless you want me to enter it.
What?
Mechanic.
I'm on a call.
Oh, what's
I can mute Randy. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna put this up here so that
I need your help on
no
the things
cheating.
that I will share with you if it comes from, anything comes from it.
Put a big blue thing up. Don't cheat and read number 1, 2, and 3. Okay.
Are you Dan?
All right.
I take a picture. I have photographic memory.
Yeah, good. All right. So we have a contract. We've negotiated it. We've gotten the contract accepted. We've gotten it signed. We have an acceptance date. What is the first thing we want to do?
Open escrow
How do we do that?
with an escrow company.
So what are the different ways you guys open escrow?
Send an email with all the contracts with buyers, sellers information,
Commission.
split and all that stuff. Or basic stuff, and then when it's, because you want to include the other agent on it so they know it went to escrow. And then
No, you don't want to include it because it's your seller's information.
if you don't give all the seller's information, first you open escrow, then you can send a separate one with the split. With the
Okay, so
seller.
what do you guys put on your email letters when you
Did you
send
write
out
it?
your email to the escrow
Oh,
company?
okay.
What do you typically put on? Does anybody have a form? You just make it up each time?
What do you give to escrow?
Lacey, Lacey, this is the first time I ever used it because I had to set an offer for my mom. Lacey had sent me an opening escrow email. Wait, no, I'm talking about something else.
Well, purchase offer and opening escrow
Yeah,
email, so
why is-
you kind
why
of
is
give a
this not blowing
summary
in my
of the
face?
main points of the offer, the purchase price, the days of escrow.
Like right in the email so they don't have to pull up and look at the RPA, but they obviously will.
No, they're gonna look, yeah.
The other thing that I saw to go a little farther than that was, hey, thanks for the, you know, or welcome email. I know we're getting to that, but welcome
all good.
email to the other agent, especially if you're the seller and they're the buyer, with all of the dates right there. And I like
The
snip that,
contingencies.
send that to my people. That was really cool. That was from an agent or might have been Chicago Title or Tyco Title in Bakersfield. That was really cool.
What dates do they have on there?
All of them, the contingency, the acceptance, the everything. The 7 days, 17 days, whatever the inspection period was, close of escrow, all that. I was like, that's so awesome because I had it
Make
right
sure
there.
everyone's on the same page.
Mhm.
Oh, I have an app. Can I share an app with them?
So do you guys include your clients on those at all, or is
I
it
did.
just you and the other agent?
No, I snipped it and send it straight to my clients because then they know what we have to be doing. I'll tell them 300 times, but then they know.
That's great.
Oh, you already know about that. Can I tell them or no? Are we getting off
Oh,
track?
no, you can tell them about the app.
Okay, I have this app. You have to pay for it. It's like $49 a year, I think. But you literally enter in, like, because I have a hard time keeping up with dates. So you enter in the address and then ask for acceptance date, and then it asks for the EMD 3 days, or if it's, and then when the disclosures are due, and then the inspection period, and then the close of escrow, and you can add a bunch of other stuff in it too. But I really
So you
like
can
it. 'cause it'll
customize it
tell
so you
me-
can set up all your dates.
Yeah, it'll
Right.
tell me, like,
Then
where
does
we
it
are.
remind you?
You can,
Or do you
you
print
can
it out?
turn on notifications.
So what
you
I
just go
would
to your
like
app.
to see is if that could be shared, because I want that. Because then I know what's going on.
Well, maybe
you
because
know.
we're on the family, you might not have to pay for it.
No, you mean
No,
like
I mean to
whether or not
share the
another agent can
notification.
share it with you?
Oh, I think I tried that. Oh, I can.
There's a few
Share.
different, there's a few
Me
different
too.
apps out there.
Share helps
Me
me
too.
too. I wanna see it.
Yeah, there are, you send
Keep
it
everything.
around to everybody. There's a few different apps out there that are good for that. That would build a timeline for you so you can stay on track. Puts calendar notifications on your calendar so you know when things are coming up, right? I always find it kind of difficult when your client says, well, what day is day 17? And you're like, hang on, I gotta get back to you. I gotta go count the calendar. I forgot. It's nice to have that information, right? Or in an email in
What
the
is that
beginning.
in?
So why would you or would you not include your client in the opening email to escrow? I mean, it's a good way to introduce them, right?
Hi there.
You could make a introduction.
Buyer's agent on there.
Well, I mean, just might be two separate emails, right? I think like one of the things we talk about on this list up here is, well, let's see, this one. So I think we have a better one than this. This one just talks about opening escrow and share seller information, but maybe maybe an email that goes to the escrow company that's designed for the other agent, and then maybe another email that goes to escrow that introduces your client to the escrow officer. So they kind of feel like they have an introduction. Because I think a lot of buyers, a lot of clients, sellers, buyers, whatever clients, they don't really understand the process like we do. And escrow officers are very official. Well, that's the escrow person. They're a little afraid to call them. They don't know if they should call them. Can they call them? So if you introduce them right off the bat and say, hey, Bob, this is, my escrow officer that I use all the time. Feel free to reach out to them. They're going to be walking us through the transaction, right? Kind of thing. So might be a really good idea. I think it's a great idea to, in a opening email to when you're representing a seller to the buyer's agent, hey, this is due on this date. 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 If you're somebody that likes to use notices to perform to enforce a contract, you can write right in there. Just know 2 days prior to each one of these expiration dates, you will receive a notice to perform. That way they won't get mad at you. They know it's coming, right? We've done that
I've
before
only had
too.
to do that once though.
And they don't
My mom's
listen.
like, I've never had to do that. I've never had to send anything.
Correct. There's a old long time way of doing business up here where we don't send them to one another until we really, really need to. And then anytime you do send one to somebody, they get all upset at you.
They do.
They get all bajiggity.
I've seen
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it just
They
happened
get
with your mom not long ago with an agent that's been around for years and years and years. And it
Yeah.
was like, hey, you keep telling us you're gonna do this and you haven't done it yet. And it got to the point where you finally have to go, look, we gotta send you a notice to perform. And then you send it.
And
it's
they're like, oh, okay, ...
Yeah, like really, you had to send this? Like, yeah, I mean, how many times are we gonna ask you nicely to,
Yeah.
to do what you need to do? Okay, so we've opened escrow. The next thing we do right away, day one, this is day one stuff. Order all the reports that we're responsible for ordering. It happens many times that we forget to order reports. And then we start falling behind timelines. Brooke and I had one recently where we forgot to order. What did we forget to order? Was it the roof or the septic or something, on harness? We just kind of were a little bit late. And what it ended up doing was some of our reports didn't even come back until
Yeah.
like the 17th day,
Yeah.
So that they
Even
came
though
back
we had a long escrow, but the inspection period was still.
still 17 days, right? So
So
then
when
we
that
get a
happens-
report back on the 15th
Can you
day.
extend that 17?
Well, it does automatically. So if I, as a seller, if I deliver you a report or a disclosure or something, you have until the 17th day or 5 days after receiving that report, whichever is later. So if I give you something on the 14th day, now your 17 days goes to 19 days. So I'm not really doing my job as your listing agent in keeping things moving in a timely fashion. So we want to order all those reports on the very, very first day. But sometimes maybe the well guy is a week out. Maybe he's out of town. Maybe because there's only, how many well guys up here are there that will inspect the report? There's like one. So what do you do if you call Jean-Luc and Jean-Luc's like, yeah, as soon as I get back from my vacation, so I'll be back in a week. Same thing with your septic. Sometimes it's hard to get septic guys there. When are these reports? When are these reports due? 7 days, on the 7th day. So if you wait till the 3rd or 4th day to order your reports, and it's going to take them 3 or 4 days to get there, you're going to be behind the 7-day curve.
And then a day or two to receive the report.
Yeah, because the report doesn't always come immediately, right? Sometimes they're super busy and they take a little bit. So get those reports ordered as quickly as you can. That should just be day one kind of stuff. You know what reports you need to order because it's right there in the contract. So you know what you've agreed to. Okay, next thing we do, we make sure that our let me just take a look at this because I want to make sure there's nothing else in there on that first day. Okay, we'll look at these all together. So we have 3 business days to make sure that EMD is in. So how do we enforce that?
Well, okay, I know that it's on us too, but doesn't escrow send them like escrow, like wire?
It's in wire instructions,
and all of that?
but they don't enforce the 3 days. What happens if, what is escrow gonna do if the buyer doesn't bring their EMD in?
They're gonna call us and be like, hey.
Yeah, they're gonna notify us with an email and say, hey, by the way, EMD is still hasn't been delivered.
Like away after 3 days.
Yeah, it might be 5 days or 7 days after, hey, by the way, we still don't have an EMD, right? So who's in charge of making sure that we stay on track with the contract, escrow or the agents? Agents, right? We are. Who enforces the contract? Escrow?
Agent.
Yeah, the listing agent, the seller. The seller enforces the contract through the listing agent. So if we want to make sure that EMD is in time, how do we do that?
Be in contact with the seller and escrow.
Okay, but how do you enforce it?
I mean, how do you make them do it?
How do you make them do it?
It's part of the contract.
Yes,
You
so
have
that they're
to.
contractually obligated to send it in by 3 days
So what can you deliver to them?
to the seller.
Notice to
You can-
perform.
So they can deliver them notice to perform.
you open escrow.
I mean, almost, right? Like,
Yeah.
so quite frankly, yeah, that's kind of the weird thing.
Yeah.
It's you're like,
It's gonna be a
okay,
great.
today's a
30 days.
Tuesday, so it would
Already
be,
being a bitch.
so if you execute it on a Tuesday, Wednesday would be day 1, it would be the first business day. You could send them a notice to perform on the very first day and be like, I told you I was gonna send these, but yeah, get your money in on time. It used to be on our cancellation of contract form, if there was no EMD, they really didn't have a way. You could kind of do it, but now it's much more clear on the language. Just because there isn't an EMD there doesn't mean that the seller has to give the EMD back to the buyer. You could still sue somebody, right, who didn't bring in an EMD. So I send, didn't never put the EMD in, canceling on them. That isn't a reason. A seller theoretically, if they wanted to and had the case to do it, could take them to small claims court and force them to pay the EMD. So there is a spot for that on our cancellation form. Okay, what else do we need to do? So if we don't have a pre-approval or a pre-qual, we need to find out. We need to make sure. So, I mean, we try not to take offers, right, without a pre-qual. Isn't that something most of us want to see? I mean, nowadays, I think we're going to probably want to see that they have hopefully a pre-qual before they go see a house. They should have a pre-qual before they sign a representation agreement, you would think, but maybe not. We're already starting to see a lot of interesting things in the field in this first 2 weeks. People asking for Buyer rep agreements, not really supposed to do it. That's what we're getting from CAR legal. It's like they said, you know, the MLS is supposed to police the agents, we're not supposed to be policing each other. So if your seller says, you could have a conversation with your seller and explain the process to them. And if your seller says, okay, that's great, I only want people with a representation agreement in my house, you can do that. But we can't just do that ourselves. Yeah, we can't force them to show us a representation agreement, but we can force them to show us pre-qual before they go into a home. Okay. Got to show capacity, right? You're not supposed to show houses to people who aren't qualified to buy it. So if we do get under a contract and they have the X's checked on the RPA stating that they're going to deliver their pre-qual within 3 days or deliver their notice that they've started a loan application within 3 days, we got to follow up on that, right? Got to make sure. Same thing with funds, bank statement. So a lot of times we'll get offer requests with a pre-approval, but we won't see proof of funds. Get your proof of funds in order. You know, try to head these things off in the very beginning of a transaction instead of waiting until the very end of a transaction, finding out that somebody really didn't have the money that they needed. Okay, what's next? What would we do next? What do you guys think we would do next? I'm kind of just put it like that.
Make sure the buyer has ordered the appraisal.
Okay, nice. Okay, make sure the buyer has ordered the appraisal. Do we as a listing agents have the ability to talk to the buyer's lender?
Yes.
What can we ask them? Has the appraisal been ordered? Are we on track? Right,
It
we really
takes
can't ask them
forever.
any personal information. We can't ask them what their FICO score was or how much money, or did they this, that, or the other. What's their personal information, social security number? None of that stuff they're going to give to you. But you can ask them basic things. Are we on track? Have we ordered the appraisal yet? You know, have they started their application? Have they signed their opening disclosures? So buyers have to sign their opening disclosures before they order the appraisal. So it's kind of like the same as the CD, the closing disclosure at the very end, but it's an estimated disclosure up in the very front. So in the Truth in Lending Act, the lender has to show the buyer, okay, this is the loan we're going to try to get you. This is how much it's going to cost you. This is going to be my origination fees. This is going to be the interest rate. This is going to be your payment. So they have to kind of do that in the very beginning to start the process. All right, so you want to make sure that the opening disclosures are signed, the appraisal has been ordered. This was really a bigger deal about, I don't know, a couple years back when there was so much activity. The appraisers weren't keeping up with the speed of the amount of transactions that we had. So appraisals, sometimes they weren't even going out to the house until 12 days into it. So it was really difficult to even get an appraisal back. So when we know that that's the current market condition, it's really important to get that appraisal ordered as fast as possible. First day, second day, third day, they should have that thing ordered by then. So that we're not late. On, we were actually writing offers, and it was pretty standard seeing offers where this is back when the loan, so it used to be that the inspections and the appraisal were both 17 days on the contract, and then the loan was 21 days. That was the default. And then what we were all doing was taking the appraisal and putting it out at 21 and taking the loan and kicking it out like 24, 25. So we were extending everything out because it was taking a long time for them to come back. So we want to check that. We want to make sure we're doing that. Okay, this can be done before you get under contract, right? When you take a listing, your seller can start working on all their disclosures. Makes it kind of keeps you a little ahead of the curve. But sometimes we're a little busy, and sometimes we wait until we get the property under contract. But we need to get our disclosures put together. So let's see, is this up to date? Does this look like it's everything that we need?
Not the booklets, right? We don't really use the booklets anymore.
I mean, it depends on what kind of NHD you're using, but yeah, the booklets are typically part of the electronic delivery when they sign the NHD. How come though? Sometimes, like I sold a piece of land the other day, and I went over to escrow to sign my docs, and in my docs they had the NHD for the seller to sign, and it was on closing day. right? So I mean, so the escrow companies are kind of doing that. And then so I hear a lot of agents that say, well, I don't worry about ordering the NHD because escrow does that, right? Who's seen that? Have you guys encountered like agents not sending over NHDs because they think escrow is going to take care of it for you? Yes, no, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, because they all try to do it for us as a service.
Yeah, I feel like they do it.
They try to order the NHD. I
Oh,
would
yeah.
I
Oh
would
no,
say
I feel like you always. order
I
the
always,
NHD.
yeah, I always preface because I know that they do, but I like to.
So if you do it, then they know you did it.
I
and then-
tell them, I always say, I'm ordering the NHD report. I'll send you the invoice and everything when I get it.
so you can put that in your opening email.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Say,
what I
look,
normally
don't
do.
order the NHD because contractually, who's supposed to deliver that? Escrow,
No.
seller, who else?
Disclose seller to.
Who else? There's two people that are supposed to deliver the NHD. Seller and the listing agent both have a responsibility to the buyer to deliver the NHD. There's 6 disclosures on there. 2 of them. I don't know if it's 2 to the buyer and 4 to the listing agent, or 2 to the seller and 4 to the listing agent, or if it's 4 to the seller and 2 to the listing agent. I can't remember off the top of my head. Have the responsibility to deliver. That's why on the NHD, on the signature page, there's a spot for the seller to sign and a spot for the listing agent to sign, because they both have a contractual obligation to deliver it. When do they have a contractual obligation to deliver it by? 7 days. So if we're signing it on the last day of escrow, or on the 25th day of escrow, when we're signing all of our docs through the escrow company and the NHDs there, are we doing it right that way? No, we're not. We need to be doing it the other way around. So NHD, if you're going to just do an NHD, I mean, you can send the booklets. Where do you find those in Zip? The booklets. Anybody know where to find the environmental hazards booklet, the mold booklet, the earthquake booklet, the energy rating booklet? Where do you find all of those in Zip? No, nobody knows.
I don't know. I used to save them to my desktop so I could just pull them up.
That's a smart idea. You just add them all as a PDF in your desktop. A smart idea.
My mom
So you can
does
find
too.
them in the EPUBs section of Zip forms. So if you ever go to Zip and the libraries in the upper right-hand corner, it should usually be set to CAR. You can switch the library over to the California EPUBs, and there's all the booklets are in there. So you could send those. It's really bulky though. It's like 80 some pages worth of booklets, at least, probably more than that. So it makes your disclosure package massive.
Are we obligated to send those though?
You're not if depending on what NHD you use. So some of the newer NHD companies, on that page that the buyer is supposed to sign, in the paragraph where the buyer signs, it says, by signing below, you're consenting to receive the booklets, energy rating, mold, lead, environmental hazards, via this link. And there's a link right there that they can click, and it'll take them to the electronic delivery page. So they're receiving them through electronic delivery. Okay, what else in that list is still good? The TDS, AVID, SPQ, FHDS. What's AS1?
Isn't that the
Says it right next to it.
the foreign
Non-foreign status,
thing?
right? Your non-foreign status. Now, when we originally did this, non-foreign status documentation needed to be delivered within 7 days. The contract switched it now. The contract now says by the close of escrow. So this is usually something that is when the seller goes to sign the seller's packet, right? When they go to sign their deed, they're going to fill out a statement of information form. It's going to ask whether or not they're, a U.S. citizen or if they're a foreigner, and then they're doing it in front of the title officer, the escrow officer, so that you have your what do you call it? Your qualified substitute right there. So they're going to fill that out, and then when the buyer signs their docs, the buyer's going to see the status of the seller. So that can actually kind of be taken care of in escrow now. It's a little easier to take care of it in escrow. Okay, prior to 1960, what do we need? Earthquake form prior to 1978, lead, right? And then we also try to get the
Water consuming.
advisories, our water conserving fixtures, carbon monoxide detectors, our MCA, our market conditions advisory. What does our market conditions advisory say? Does anybody know? Why?
It's basically, isn't it something like, this is the market, and if it doesn't, like you're not responsible for the
For the shift
for them
in the
not
market?
being, yeah, out of like 100%.
Yeah, the opening line, I think something like, real estate markets are, they fluctuate,
Yeah,
right? And I'm not
you're not responsible for the.
an expert in telling you what's going to happen to the market. I don't have a crystal ball. The price that you accepted for your house is the best price that you think you should have accepted for your house, and the price of the offer that we wrote is based on market knowledge, but it's still up to you, right? It kind of relieves us as the real estate agents and brokers from being responsible for the pricing. What's the SCSA? Randy, do you have a question?
Why is my computer so slow?
Oh, that part I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's old. I'm still trying to get on. I've got you on my phone. I'm listening to you, but I can't see the little writing on the phone, so I got to get on my lap.
Oh,
So I'm just waiting for it to load.
see if I can make it right.
Statewide buyers.
What is the statewide buyer and seller advisory? Why is it so big? What is it?
500 lawsuits.
Yeah, I mean, Randy, good point, right? We always like to kid around and say every time there's a major lawsuit somewhere, there's something else that pops up on the statewide buyer and seller
It talks about
advisory.
like arbitration, building permits, zoning and code compliance.
So it's basically all the rights that a buyer or a seller has in a real estate transaction per these particular situations. So it's who's got the statewide buyer and seller?
I do.
Well, what's the first page that has all the table of contents on it? Right, that's table of contents. How
Yeah.
many items are on that table of contents? What's the numbering on that? Let's see if 71. So there's 71 different topics, right? 71 different topics of what could possibly happen in a real estate transaction. Of those 71, what do you think a typical transaction? I mean, it's not going to have all 71 because there's things on there that talk about erosion when you live on the coast, right? So we don't live on the coast, so we're not going to talk about erosion. There's going to be things that talk about, radon gas. We're not, I mean, there's radon gas pretty much everywhere, but it's not really a big issue that pops up. What other items? Give me some of those 71. Fire hardening. So like people in a big city right in the heart of Bakersfield probably don't have a fire hardening issue. So it's not going to show up on their transaction. It shows up on almost every single one of our transactions.
I've never heard of this golf course disclosures.
Golf course disclosures, right? What do you think's listed in there? Why do you think there's a golf course
Golf
disclosure?
rules, like if it's in the HOA or something.
What about,
People are gonna be coming
what about if
to
somebody
your house
gets
putting balls into your
Oh,
windows.
duh.
yeah, what about if somebody gets plucked in the head by a golf ball and dies, right? So yeah, so it's again, it's there for their information. That's why it's an advisory. What's the difference between an advisory and a disclosure? What's the difference between an advisory and a disclosure?
Advisory isn't advisory just like advising, and a disclosure is like a mandatory thing.
Talking about what you know, it's usually very specific to the property, right? A disclosure is something that's going to be property specific, and advisory is just general information. It doesn't necessarily mean it's pertaining to this particular property, but it could be. It's just general information. The disclosure is going to be a material fact about the property, right? So that's the difference between the two of them. So I mean, they're both important, but obviously disclosure is a little bit more important. Okay, opening packets. Opening packets come from the escrow company. We've all seen those. You have to let our client know, hey, they have 5 days to return and sign those. They need to review them. What's in the opening packet from on the seller side? What are they going to see? Preliminary title report, what else are they gonna see? Commissions instructions is gonna be there.
Agent opening.
Well, that, they're gonna get their own. So you got agent opening packet for both agents, and you have a opening packet for the seller, opening packet for the buyer. What's really the most important thing in there is the escrow instructions. So the escrow instructions tell you the process of the transaction, when the acceptance date was, when the close date is, and any of the things that are gonna happen, they will in there. And anytime we change anything, what does the buyer and seller receive when it comes to instructions? Yeah, it's an amendment, right? You end up getting, you get additional escrow instructions, amended escrow instructions, or subsequent escrow instructions. So they'll have to sign them again if anything changes. So that's really the most important thing. They need to review it, see what's there. And from the buyer side, yeah, the buyer needs to start reviewing that preliminary title report, and the seller needs to review their preliminary title report to make sure that the things that are on there are legitimate. Are there ever mistakes on the title report?
Of course.
All the time, right? Maybe there's a loan that's still showing that the seller already paid for, and now so then what's going to have to happen, right? That's the title officer's job, is to go clear all that kind of stuff up. Okay, well, I need a letter, or I need to see that this loan was taken care of, that this encumbrance is no longer on the property, because otherwise they're not going to close that transaction without satisfying everything that they see on the title report. Okay, so sometimes that stuff, has mistakes on it, so we always want to take a look at it. Okay, I remember we are the listing agent here. I think this one often gets overlooked, making sure that the house is ready for the appraisal. Okay, making sure we have our smoke detectors. Where do they belong?
Above the door, in each room, once in the hallway.
No, not in the kitchen.
You gotta have one out in the living area, and then every bedroom.
Above
They
the
didn't
door.
necessarily have to be above the door. It could be up on the ceiling. It could be anywhere really in the bedroom, as long as it's in the bedroom. It's just,
Oh, it can be anywhere in the bedroom? I thought it had to be like right there at the door.
I don't
That
think
way
it
while
has
the
to
smoke
be,
is entering, it gets.
but it doesn't have to be like on the wall above the door. It can be up on the ceiling. I
Okay.
think a lot of people put them behind the wall and the door because you don't see them. You can walk in and it's immediately behind you. So carbon monoxide detectors. Where do carbon monoxide detectors
In the
have to go?
hallway,
Hallway.
Which hallway?
the main hallway.
Bedrooms, one to the bedroom.
Going to the bed. What happens if you have a split wing? Both hallways. You have upstairs, downstairs, in front of every sleeping quarter, right? Or a group of sleeping quarters. You have 3 bedrooms at the end of the hallway. You just need one. Okay. All right. And then the water heater. Tell me about the water heater.
2 straps.
2 straps. Where do they have to be, the straps?
There's certain
Top and the bottom,
measurements,
like
but
14 inches, is it? in
It's the top third and the bottom third.
Okay.
Okay. Just kind of, because they're not going to go in there and measure them. Top third, bottom third. If you have 2 straps on the bottom, it'll tip over. 2 straps on the top, it'll slide out. You have to have one bottom third, top third. What kind of straps do they have to be? Metal. What else?
you have to have, don't you have to have that
Solid, or can
draining?
they have the holes punched in it like the plumber's tape?
Solid.
Got to be solid. You can't have a plumber's tape anymore. You used to be able to have what was called plumbers. They also have one that's like a seat belt. It's made out of like a metal mesh. That one works.
And it has to be
Solid.
Put into a stud.
And it's got to be put into a stud with strong enough. You can't put like a 1-inch screw into the stud. You're supposed to have a lag bolt, right? It should be about 2.5 inches long, and it should be the big giant hex head, big thick bolt. It goes right into the 2x4s. You got to make sure that you're in 2x4s. So that's really important. What about the pressure release valve and the piping coming out of that? Does
The
that
piping
happen?
it can't be like flimsy, right?
Can't be flexed. It has to be.
Yeah.
So will the appraiser call that out? Yes or no?
Yes.
I feel like the inspector might call that
Home
out.
inspector will call it out. Appraiser, I've seen appraisers let the flex line slide. They really don't seem to care. Their job there is not to check to make sure that the water heater is in working order. Their job is to make sure what are they trying to make sure it doesn't do?
Health and safety?
doesn't fall over in an earthquake. That's that whole reason why we strap. Okay. In an earthquake, and it happened in Ridgecrest, the Ridgecrest quake, what was that, 5 years ago? One house caught on fire. Why? Because the guy's water heater tipped over and flame came on and caught the house on fire. So that's what happens. Pipe breaks, boom, spark, fire. So majority of fires that happen traditionally in earthquakes are from water heaters tipping over. So that's why you have to brace them. They have to be able to handle an earthquake and not fall. Okay. All right. What else? What else are we gonna do?
They also have to be in a tray, no?
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
The metal, I mean, the metal tray, it's good because it's supposed to help move water out, right? So if the water heater, it's defective and it starts leaking and it rusts out at the bottom, you want that water to hit the tray, and the tray is supposed to take the water and move it outside of the house. You're supposed to do that when you put a new one in. A lot of times though, they're not there, and we don't necessarily fix them, but they're going to get called out on every home inspection. Home inspector is going to call.
Josh,
Yes, sir.
so the metal tray is not a requirement?
It's not a requirement to get the household, like nobody's gonna call that out. The home inspector is gonna call it out, but it does, I mean, when you put a new one in, you're supposed to have a tray. When you do a new
Okay.
install, you're not gonna get your signed job card from the building department without one there. But if you find a house that doesn't have one there, it does not have to be retrofitted to sell. It's not a point of sale requirement.
Okay,
Doors on the door. That's another thing that freezes always call out.
So that's actually a good thing we can add right here. So see, Mariana's just adding us a new one.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is going to be the fire door and self-closing. Fire door self-closing. So it's two things. So we're gonna put it kind of like, okay. So explain that. What does it mean by a fire door?
It has to be.
No, go. No, you got it. This is yours. This is your
Oh,
ball.
it has to be that heavy door that once you walk out to, it'll shut on its own. That way, and it has to have that thing on the bottom, so there's no air that goes in and out of your garage.
Yeah, so you have to have, I think the door has to be 1 7/8 inches thick, I believe. It's got to be solid core, wood door. It's got to have a 1 hour fire rating. Okay. It's got to be on spring loaded hinges so that it closes completely. Sometimes, you know, what happens is when they close, they slam. And so some homeowners will go out and adjust them so that they don't slam, but sometimes then they don't close all the way. They kind of almost close, but they don't latch shut. So the appraiser is going to check that. If the fire door is breached in any way, like Mariana was talking about, family has a dog that goes in and out of the garage, so they put a doggy door in there, that's going to breach the 1 hour fire rating
Not just
of
a
that door.
any wall that connects a house to the garage.
Mhm. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So your garage is supposed to be a fire safe zone or a fire contained zone. So there's actually different drywall in the garage than there is in the house. It's thicker. Okay, it's got a longer fire rating. So that room, because it's a room that has combustion, automobiles, usually the water heater, usually the furnace, right? So it's fire combusting room. It's got to be separated from the house. So if you see, you know, the stairway that pulls down from the ceiling, is that a breach of the firewall?
Yes, you need to have that material.
Like 90% of the time, that's going to be a breach. Especially with the newer houses now, we're not putting a firewall between the garage and the house above the ceiling. We're using the garage itself as a firewall. So as soon as you cut a hole in it, you're breaching its safety. There are some manufacturers that make those ladders that when they close, they're fire safe. They seal. But they cost about $3,000, $3,500. So most people want to go to Home Depot and buy the one that costs $250, which isn't fire safe. And they cut a hole in the drywall and they install that ladder.
But the guy that you said his water heater tipped over and burned the house. I mean, it's supposed to be a firewall in the garage with a heater, you know, I mean.
Well, yeah, but I mean, those are two different things though. So you could have had a fire, but I mean, but it's only gonna like, so a firewall in your garage doesn't keep your house from catching on fire. It slows down the rate in which the fire is gonna reach your house. So they want a 1 hour fire rating because they want you to be able to get out of the house. It's not really 1 hour. I mean, it's gonna burn faster than an hour, but so what happens if you break that breach? So if you look in the attic of your house where all the trusses are, and if it's open all the way across to the garage and you have a breach and the fire gets through that ladder access, once it gets up into your attic, it's going to draft the fire completely across the top of your house and the whole roof is going to catch on fire and it's going to go fast. So that's why you don't want to, that's why you want to make sure you have your firewall intact. So those are things that the appraiser is going to look at. If you have that hole up there, they're going to usually require you to remove the ladder system, to patch it with the proper thickness drywall, and then tape it and mud it so that it's all sealed up.
Really?
So then you can't go up there.
Now, I mean, after the house sells, if the new buyer really thought that was an awesome feature of the house, can they open it back up? Absolutely. You can do
Is that
whatever
like you
you
a
want.
new thing that they started doing? Because I've had a couple of us, but they just say that they put that material on top of the stairs.
Which,
Not
oh,
just drywall
really?
it.
So I've had them actually make me take it out
Oh,
and
wow.
drywall it and tape it and mud it shut. Because it's got to be completely fire safe. So you've had them just tell you put some kind of fire, like
Cover on it.
interesting. Haven't heard that yet. So next time that happens, let me know. I'd love to hear.
Is there a house on Elm Street?
Okay, so now we are getting to day 7. So by day 7, our seller should have delivered to the buyer all statutory disclosures and reports. Okay, and it says to not be limited to, but must include the following. What do we got down here? The NHD, right? The NHD booklets, unless they're attached to the NHD, or TDS. The AVID. I mean, honestly, this really should just be one AVID, right? This is the listing agent's AVID. Does the buyer's agent's AVID have to be delivered to the buyer within 7 days?
No, 17.
Does it, I mean, it really behooves the agent on that side to do it as soon as possible, but there's nothing in the contract that states when the buyer's agent's AVID needs to be delivered. There is, though, on ours. Where is it in our contract, or where is it in the paperwork that mandates the listing agent's AVID to be attached in the disclosures?
No.
In the TDS. It's in the TDS, right? Section 3 of the TDS, where the listing agent signs and he's checking the box that says see the attached AVID. So the AVID's got to be there, right, for that TDS to be delivered. So the buyer's side, though, not so much. It's not required. It's only sections 1, 2, 3, and then where the seller signs that have to be completed on the TDS for it to be delivered, where the buyer's agent fills it out and signs it. That's not part of the requirement of the seller to deliver. Yes.
Also, is it required for the seller to deliver the buyer's agent's affid to the seller, or no? Because no, right? They don't have to sign. They don't have to acknowledge.
No. As a matter of fact, it used to be on the AVID that the seller would sign the AVID. Then it became the seller has to initial the AVID, and now on the new version of the ADID, it says optional seller signature. Why? Because we would do AVIDs and take them to the seller, and the seller would say, I don't agree with what you wrote about my house. I'm not signing this. So they don't have to sign it now. They don't even have to initial it anymore. It's optional. Why? Who does the AVID belong to? Who does it protect? Us, the agents. It's our visual inspection. It's not the seller's disclosure. So the seller doesn't have to sign it.
I had a seller really get angry at me for recommending that they have a home, that the buyer have a home inspection. Because the things that came up on the home inspection that were needed to be done, he said, if you didn't say that, I wouldn't have to be doing this. I said, well, if you knew this, you should have disclosed it.
Yeah. If you knew these problems were there, why didn't you disclose
I
them?
didn't believe it.
I'm actually having a couple issues with that. You look at the SPQ and the TDS, I mean, they don't disclose any issues.
Mhm.
Then you get the home inspection and it's a shit show. So
what does real estate law say about disclosure?
It's your
And,
best
and,
ability.
and it's, and its source.
It's your best ability. Like, if
It-
you don't
it's-
know those things,
but
some
it-
people don't know those things.
But it also says it doesn't matter the source of the disclosure, as long as the disclosure has been made, then it alleviates the seller from the burden of disclosure. So if the home inspector finds 100 things that the seller didn't disclose, the home inspector is protecting the seller and is informing the buyer. The seller does not have to amend a TDS or an SPQ because of a report that's discovered by the buyer or anybody that the buyer hires or
Right.
any other party.
but the recourse after the fact is,
What the buyer knows,
If the
right?
buyers get upset, how do they not know the heater wasn't working? Are they
They-
lying to us? What else are they lying about? So
Absolutely, it could raise all kinds of suspicions. But what does the buyer ultimately have the right to do if they don't like what they see?
Cancel.
Cancel.
And isn't it
Right.
in everybody's best interest that there's an inspection? I mean, it's like the inspector is protecting both parties.
Okay, so we're going back to why is it important for an agent to do an AVID? That's why. I mean, it's important for all of us to do our parts. Why is it important for a buyer to get a home inspection? Because they're probably gonna find things that the seller didn't know about. Okay, depending, I mean, yes, go ahead, Terry.
Question about the, it's my understanding, I don't know if you have an advanced program.
I don't even like where to start. There's an
But
for each.
is it true
There's
that
no
when we
fee
walk
for
through,
separate.
we're just supposed to
And
know
it's the same
something
party and
that looks like
There's
it
no,
could
like,
have
you get
need further inspection?
So the AVID says that we're supposed to do a diligent visual inspection and note things that are material defects that would affect value or desirability. So it clearly states that we're not going to address any issues that are inaccessible. We're not going to go under the house. We're not going to go on the roof. And it states that if there's furniture blocking something, we're not going to pick up the furniture, move the furniture, look under rugs, look under beds. So there's going to be things that we're not supposed to see. It's supposed to be a visual inspection, and it's only supposed to be items that are material defects.
So now, what I normally do, if the, like I come in this room, and I'll say, nothing to note, but at the end I put marks on floor, marks on walls.
Yeah, you could. I mean, is that a material defect? I guess if there's marks all over the.
Staying in the.
Yeah, it's staying in the ceiling.
I feel
right?
like you have to
That's a
put
des-
something,
That's a
like-
desirability issue.
I feel like sometimes you have to put something, because then it just looks like you didn't do it, like nothing to note in the
So,
entire
The
report.
purpose of the AVID is to make sure that the agent's actually been in the home and looked at the house too.
That's why I always put recommended professional home
Which
inspection.
is a lot of out-of-town
And it's
agents
only
aren't.
If there's something, a crack in the wall,
Crack in the
Yeah.
wall, like this one, right? We got a crack over here somewhere, or maybe it's over there, crack in the wall. Like, yeah, that why? You know, it's supposed to make the buyer go, oh, there's a crack in the wall. I wonder why. Should we get a structural engineer? Like, seller, is there any reason why there's a crack in that wall? Oh, it was there when I bought the house. Oh, no, that crack, after the earthquake, that crack showed up. Oh, well, okay, maybe I need to bring in somebody to look at
and
something.
you don't describe the crack. I put
Yeah, you just say there's a crack. You don't say it looks like a severe crack. It looks like, yeah.
I went to a class years ago on how to keep your seller out of court.
Mhm.
And one example on the AVID was, the agent said crack in walkway, cement walkway, due to the tree
The roots, yeah.
lawsuit. Did they have an arborist?
What was the
Yeah,
lawsuit?
Well, how do you know? Yeah, how do you know was
I
the tree?
believe it was
roots, you know?
something with the foundation of the house. The house was settling, the house was falling. You don't, unless you're a soils expert
Mhm.
or a tree arborist,
Yeah,
you don't say nothing.
Yeah.
You're just supposed to say there's a crack. You're not supposed to give your opinion on why it's there. You're not supposed to give, so if the door doesn't look like it closes properly, you just say the door appears to be ajar or not closed squarely. You don't say it's because this wall is falling or because this, that, or the other. You don't know why. You just are mentioning that you see something there. It's supposed to make the buyer say, oh, okay, well, do I need to get somebody out here? Do I need to hire a specialist? Because the buyer has access to the inspection, that inspections list on the buyer's inspection elections, the BIE with all 40 or 39 different inspectors you can bring in. Just that's what that's for. Mariana, did you have a question? Get your
No,
hand
it
up.
was more like, or don't state the size or anything, like I was taught like a long time ago, like you can't say like small crack or big crack, cause
Just crack.
it could be a small, but to them it could be big,
Mhm,
Really?
mhm.
just say crack.
Yeah, crack in the
Again.
wall.
A matter of opinion.
So that's when I use, that's why I like to use the Glide AVID, because then I can take a photo of it and I can try to give them some reference on the size of the crack.
Yeah, sometimes
Right.
less is more.
Yeah, definitely less is more.
Less is more. I would say over disclosure is your friend. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
be careful there.
Over disclosure is your friend?
Absolutely. I would disclose everything I possibly could. And then that buyer still wants to buy the house. I'm good. Right? You don't ever want to feel like you're hiding something. You don't ever want to feel like you're suppressing information, because that's how you get in trouble. Like, yeah, I knew that was there. I just didn't want to tell you about it. I didn't want you to back out of the deal.
Yeah,
So I'd rather tell them everything and let them stay in the deal.
cause they can sue you after the fact, right? Like, after
Yeah, they can
the-
totally, if they can prove that
They
you
moved in and you realized it.
didn't disclose something that you should have done, then you're
I
gonna
feel
get
like my
sued.
mom went through something like this about.
She got hit about that driveway.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it was
No, just
disclosed.
one
I think they probably could have fought it, but I think the pops just said, you know what, let's just write him a check and make him go away. So,
It's
because
kind of how we handle things. If somebody gets upset, and like your child, some children here, let's go shopping. It's like, let's
go
write
shopping.
it.
Okay,
We're not gonna talk about feelings.
so AVID, SPQ, or an ESD. What is the ESD? Exempt seller disclosure. Okay, so that's when we have a seller who isn't legally required to give us a TDS. They have to do an exempt seller disclosure. Any lease agreements or leased equipment. So we got to share all of our lease agreements and all of the terms of that. That's solar, propane, etc. Other things in there, alarm systems, water softening systems, whatever, anything that might be leased. If it's pre-1960 or pre-1978 or both, the lead disclosure and the earthquake has to be part of that package. And then all of our reports, okay, the pest, the septic, the well, the roof, whatever it was that we said we were going to pay for and deliver, we have to deliver. We have to deliver them on time. Okay, what else do we need to send over? Notice of release of any illegal controlled substances. Hopefully that's never going to become an issue, but that's in the contract. Notice of any special tax assessments. So what is that? What are special tax assessments?
Melrose.
Millaroos are kind of in a category of their own, but yes. What else?
Wouldn't all that pop up?
BBS is not-
I mean, the BVS has tax assessments on their bill.
Is that like
Right.
Right, but
not an
that's not the
easement?
city.
It's kind of like the city, but it's, so you pay a county tax rate and then you still pay those extra fees for the gate, for the police, for the water, all that stuff that's in there. We're supposed to disclose that. And you do, I think there's a question on the,
Or like the Golden
TDS.
Hills one, there's.
Yeah,
you
you
should
know,
be
there's a
checking.
tax
For
assessment.
the ground.
Yeah.
we'll have to
that's
take a
what I'm
look.
talking about.
We'll take a look
Over
after.
by, the
So
nature
special
park
tax assessments,
over there,
any
there's
other
something
place
like
that
that.
we know has special tax assessments?
Golden Hills,
Where in
by
Golden
the
Hills?
nature park.
by Oak Knolls.
Yeah, just that one little section over there off of Weston
Yeah.
and Sears,
'Cause I
right?
remember
Because
that
they have a
house that
sewer
was for
system
sale.
over there and they have a road, they pave the roads, they have a tax assessment.
Wow, how much is that?
I think is
Anybody know?
900.
it 900 a year? Yeah, I think it's like 900 a year.
907, I think.
And it's built into your property taxes.
Wow,
Mhm.
then BBS CSD is cheap.
I like how you say that. And why would that be though? Because that area over there probably has about 40 houses or 50 houses that pay that assessment. Bear Valley has a couple thousand houses that pay that assessment. And so just so you guys know, that one in Bear Valley. So HOA, they can raise their rates whenever they want. They have
And
a
they
cap. They have a cap on how much they can raise it every year, but they don't have to take a vote. The tax assessments, those have to go on the ballot. I think there's a measure. I think I heard that somebody's proposing a measure for this election cycle for, is it water again? I thought they were gonna raise it for the police department. That's what I heard. That they wanted to raise more tax money for the police department. So,
For
Well,
BBS?
thank you for letting me know.
That's ridiculous.
I think well, yeah,
They
so
don't-
they tried that
Don't really
before
do anything.
and it didn't pass. It failed. What else recently they tried to put on there that failed? Remember the mailboxes?
mailboxes, yeah.
About 3 or 4 years
The
ago.
locked ones?
Yeah, they wanted to raise money for the locked mailboxes and the community voted it down. So
And
It
they
didn't happen.
complain about,
so
they
you'll,
complain about mail theft.
I haven't heard much about it recently.
Wait till holiday season.
Okay, what else do we have to disclose? Any material fact that the seller agents know, the seller's agent knows that is not specifically on any of the specified in any of the disclosures. So like sometimes we know stuff, right? That maybe our seller doesn't know. Maybe your seller didn't put anything about, being close to the airport or being close to the train or something of that sort. They didn't
Being
put
by
that on their
school?
TDS or being close to a school. We know it. We gotta disclose it. I would say, for a while there, we were having some serious issues with fence lines. We still kind of are probably in Bear Valley, had problems with fence lines, right? Sellers like, yeah, no, the fence has been there for the last 20 years. I got nothing to disclose. But then you might know that the CSD is meticulously going through each tract and getting everybody to move their fence lines back. You might want to disclose that.
I think that my mom also had an issue with that when somebody bought the house over here. They did a whole thing and it turns out that my dad had a little handshake with the person that owned the house, and it turns out that our fence was encroaching on their property, but it was a said thing and it was not a big deal.
And now it's a big
It
deal.
ended up being.
Yeah, it ends up being a big deal
And then
later.
my mom has
right?
to move the fence.
Mhm.
I got neighbors encroaching on mine and they just think that
Those horsies or the new one?
the back one and the side one. Yeah.
Encroaching onto your property, or they just
They're
built
using my fence. They're using my whole back fence.
and it's on
keep
your,
their
and
dogs
it's on
in.
your property, it's not
Yeah.
on the boundary.
Goats, dogs, and I think chickens.
You know our upper property that we don't use?
My
Yeah.
fence was built 12 inches
Inside.
They use,
inside my line.
they use our upper fence as their backyard fence for all of their animals.
So
There's
what
not
are you
like a
supposed to do as a
separate-
home seller in that situation?
Is that a disclosure? Well, what if
As
you
a
don't
home
know?
seller?
As a homeowner, what do you do as a
I
homeowner?
verbally told the one neighbor, the other one killed himself. And so I have to let the wife know that I'm gonna be pretty much tearing it down and,
Sorry.
putting a different one up, but you need to understand that you can't attach to it. It's not your fence. It's on my property.
It's
You're
on a
encroaching.
shared fence
So I was
line.
gonna send a nice letter.
Yeah, you need
and
to
then-
notify them in writing, right? Because what is prescriptive easement?
Is that when you share a fence line?
So it's when somebody does something conspicuously, meaning in the open, in the public eye, somebody does something in the public eye, all parties are aware of it, and the one party, the offended party, doesn't notify and say you can't do that after a 5-year period of time, they get to continue to do it.
Yeah.
So you have to, this is also the rule in intellectual property law. You ever see hear about people getting a cease and desist letter because you use their logo or you use their slogan, their intellectual property? If they don't send you that cease and desist letter, then you are then allowing it to happen. So they have to. The law requires them to oppose what you're doing so that they can protect their intellectual property. Same thing with your property rights. If somebody's using your fence, you need to notify them that you're not allowing them to do that. Okay, so definitely anything you know. So back to this, anything you know. So we got the FERPTA. I would say we could probably remove that from this form now because it's probably getting taken care of in escrow. HOA documents. Okay, so if we have HOA stuff, we're supposed to be getting them over copies of the documents. I know we've talked about this a couple of times this last month. Hoping that the escrow companies are at least sharing HOA docs with buyers, but it's the seller's responsibility to get those over. So keep an eye on your HOA docs. What HOA docs are they supposed to be receiving?
CCNRs.
CCNRs, what else? What does the
regulate-
contract say? Says 12 months of financials and 12 months of minutes from meetings and special meetings.
But all that is public information though. The buyer should do their due diligence and look it up online now.
So sometimes it's, yeah, public and sometimes it isn't. So it depends on the HOA
The
company.
CCNRs are public.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes we put on all of our Form C, bvcsd.org or go to bvsa.org or
How
whatever
come
they are.
escrow sometimes sends all that to them?
Because they also have a copy of the digital
So
docs.
whose job is it though?
I
Or
mean,
is
it's
it-
whose job is it? Contract says it's the seller's job.
That's
but-
so hard. It's so much like.
Yeah, it's big. So the same way that you had you had what forms were on your
The
computer?
booklets, yeah.
The
Oh,
booklets.
yeah.
You could also have HOA docs on there too, and you could just send those over digitally.
Yeah.
By the way, here you go. Here's HOA docs.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that hard. It's just a PDF file. Okay, any new material facts and defects affecting the property, insurance claims within the past 5 years. Okay, that's important to know. Why do we want to know about insurance claims? Why do we want to know about insurance claims?
Oh, because if there's an insurance claim going on and you buy it, that's your problem.
So if there's an ongoing insurance claim, sometimes the property, there are some properties that are uninsurable according to some certain insurance agencies. So you may have a harder time getting a fair market value insurance policy because if a house has continuous claims, it kind of gets a little black cloud that circles over the top of it. Then insurance companies don't want to insure it because then there's going to be another claim, most likely. Like these guys, they're in it to make money. They're not really there to protect their clients. So if it's a house that has a historical rap sheet of problems, maybe it was kind of not built very well, or maybe it has inferior materials like galvanized piping or whatever, like the flood's coming and it's in the near future. So insurance claims. What else about insurance claims? Depending on the insurance claim, you might want to check to see whether or not the repair was done by a professional, by a contractor. If it needed to have permits, did they do it with permits? So that could open up a can of worms for more questions. Okay, preliminary title report. We want to check it to make sure everything's going to be good and clean on there. I mean, the title company's going to try to make sure it's without cloud before they secure the property anyway, but you always want to look at your preliminary title report. This is from the seller side. Home warranty, you want to, order the home warranty, or not order the home warranty in this case. That's probably shouldn't really even be on. I'm going to take this off because this is not a seller side. This is a buyer side. So we're going to just
Unless you
drop
remember
in.
how you were saying that you offer home warranty for the seller side for a
You
couple of days.
You can do that. Yes, we do have seller home warranties that we can have, but as far as our responsibility at this stage in the game, this is definitely something that all we're doing is offering a certain amount of money for the allocation of cost. Okay, the buyer has the right to research building permits, Megan's Law, gas transmission pipeline. So I just put that in there because that's not a seller requirement. It's in the contract, but it's the buyer. Need to let the seller know that the buyer can conduct any additional investigations during those first 17 days, right? So we've had sellers that get tired of buyers constantly coming back with more and more inspections and inspectors. You got to tell your seller, too bad. You can't block them. Okay, you can't prevent the buyer from doing their due diligence. The last one I can think of, Terry had over on Quail. We sent the second or third septic company over because the answers we were getting from the first two weren't satisfactory. The third company shows up and the seller's like, no, I don't want you on my property. I'm tired. I'm tired of septic people coming and digging around my backyard. So then we had to go back to the agent and say, look, you know, we've got to be able to go get this other company. And it's a good thing they did, because it was that third company that ended up doing the work. So on a bad septic system. Buyer, let's see, conduct, any additional investigations. If the buyer does not receive full disclosure during the specified time period, but receives a disclosure or report after the period has expired, the buyer shall retain 5 days to review the new disclosure or report and act accordingly. So again, it's so important to make sure we get everything over, no later than at least the 12th day, so that they have till the 17th day to get everything removed. And then what do we do as sellers? We get them to remove their contingency, right? We don't want to give them this free time. So the buyer should execute all reports and disclosures and return them to the seller by the 17th day. What else should they also be sending with that? All those signed disclosures and reports. They should be sending over their removal of contingencies. Is that going to typically happen in the world out there today? How many times have we seen the buyer voluntarily remove their contingency?
They don't voluntarily.
One
you have to
time,
tell
or
them.
happens all the time? Or you do it all the time? Just one time?
Depends on the agent, like Shannon Bell is really good with that.
Really good with that? It depends on the agent. A lot of agents will not remove that contingency unless you ask them a few times or send them a notice to perform to
Is
get it
because
over.
they forget, or they just don't?
I think they
feel
just
like
want to
they
like
want
let
to?
it go underneath.
You just
in
want to let
case
it kind of go.
Some shit happens.
Yeah. Kind of like a safety feature, kind of trying to hold on to it as long as possible. I mean, I know a lot of agents that's their business practice, right? To just never kind of send one over unless they're forced to. Again, it kind of borderlines on that. Are you going to get into some kind of a pissing match with an agent? Why did you have to do that? Why did you have to send me this notice to perform? All I would say to that is these transactions is, even though we're dealing agent to agent and we're trying to work together to get to the finish line, it's really the buyer and the seller. And we have to put our client's best interest before our relationship with the agent on the other side. We really are executing or enforcing, I should say, these contracts for our client. And if we send a notice to perform to enforce a contract for our client and the agent on the other side gets mad at you, you have to have thick skin and not take it personally and just be, hey, look, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just doing my job. I'm just enforcing this contract for my client. That's all it is. This is not me saying that you're a horrible agent. This is not me, saying that you're not doing your job. This is my seller saying, I would like to enforce this contract because I feel like things aren't moving forward. So try not to make it personal. I know it can be difficult. Okay, hopefully by the 17th day, the buyer has sent in a request for repairs. I mean, I shouldn't say hopefully. Hopefully they don't send a request for repairs, but hopefully if they're going to send a request for repairs, they've done it by the 17th day. Yes.
I have a question for you. As a listing agent, right? You go in, you see some defects in the house, nothing major, small cracks and stucco and I don't know, stuff like, do you normally have the seller do all those repairs? Like what kind of repairs do you normally have the seller do before you list a house? Because I feel like if you do the stucco, if you make the seller do the stucco repair and all that stuff, then you're still going to get an RR and they're still going to have to cough up more money.
You're going to get an RR no matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like,
so I mean, I
do you
think the only time I ever recommend them to do anything, I think, is if whatever the problem with the house is going to limit the desirability of the house so much that nobody's going to make an offer. So it's usually cosmetic stuff. I mean, structural, if you have real structural issues, you're going to be stuck. Like you should have done that probably when the problem happened instead of letting it just go on and on. It depends on your client. It depends on the house. It depends on if they have the capital to do it. It could be expensive. I try to sell the house as is as much as possible, as much as I possibly can. That's me personally. You know, I've seen like Terry, and I keep going back to Terry just because she's had so many transactions. It's easy to find an example. I've seen her go in and replace the flooring because the flooring was super duper bad. So you go in and replace the flooring and make the house look better. But you have to have the financial resources to do that. Either the buyer or I've seen agents do it. I know Terry's done it. I've done it. Lorena does it, where they actually have a slush fund of money to go in and, you know, we could get 20,000 more for your house, or it could sell faster if it had quartz countertops instead of Formica. Or
Right, but is that in the client's best interest though? When you're making them do all these repairs,
it's not. But
It's not even a guarantee that it'll sell
it depends on
fast.
what the seller's trying to get out of the transaction. So if the seller wants top dollar, and you say to your seller, "Hey, I don't think you're going to get top dollar because these things over here are, you know, are old and they need to be updated," and they go, "Well, do you think I should update it?" Well, I go, "I mean, if you really want to get top dollar and you have the resources, you could probably update that." I mean, they have to make that decision.
but it's not even guaranteed though.
Nothing's
So
guaranteed.
can't they come back at you and say, you made me, like you told me, change the countertops?
I didn't tell you.
spent
No, you
20,000.
asked me if I thought it was a good idea. I said, you know, I mean, that's really entirely up to you, Mr. Seller. I think it might make your house sell faster, but maybe not. Like, I'm never gonna give him a definitive short closed answer. I'm always gonna say, it might make your house sell faster, maybe not. I mean, I can't make that, I don't have that knowledge. So never. I mean, personally, I just say sell it the way it is. If somebody wants to offer you less for that, then it's part of the negotiation. I mean, it's got to kind of go back to that as is.
Like,
part.
don't even like maybe paint it inside to make it look at least presentable.
Maybe.
I mean, there
How
was
bad
some-
is
I
it?
remember on,
Like, oh, paint it, retouch it, like it'll look nicer.
Yeah.
get offers.
El
Painting
Rancho.
is not bad.
She
It's not
Painting's
hard.
fixed some
piece of
stuff
cake.
up, but I think she
Yeah,
did
but
that on
it's
her own, like she
change
wanted
What is your opinion?
She did.
Like,
She
just
did.
to make it
roof
look
was bad,
Yeah,
Terry.
because she's that way. but
Yeah, I think it all depends on the seller, like,
The sellers and.
Yeah.
You don't have to, but just know that
Yeah.
if you do this, it pops. They
Yeah.
said that was copper, they decided not to and lower the price.
Well, and especially if they've had a bunch of, so they've been in the house 20 years. And then they have all these things hanging on the wall. And then when they take them off, it's like, you can not just holes, but you can see like a difference in color.
There's
Like,
some
Like the
things
dirt.
you can
yeah,
say,
yeah,
Your opinion, this is just my opinion,
right,
you know, you don't have to,
right,
it'll sell, but
right,
it may take a little longer, you may get a little less.
right.
Yeah, like our seller on Sand Canyon, like you know, the Country Canyon house.
Yeah.
When I went in to get the listing agreement, he was like, "Oh, my handyman's coming to repair this crack," and there was a leak in both of the showers that he came and fixed, but he did that on a, you know, we didn't tell him to do that. But
Yeah.
I mean, the leaking showers was probably gonna get called out, so it's good that he fixed it.
So but does it have to get done? No, I mean, it
No.
just really depends on what kind of contract you get into with what kind of buyer,
And probably what
If the
kind of
buyer-
seller too,
you know,
like,
Also, the first impression when you go to the house,
huge, right?
you know, the trim, what do you call it,
The
fascia?
fascia. Paint it,
Oh my gosh, paint it.
paint it. Yeah, make it look clean and
I
fresh.
painted it.
yeah.
for clients.
Like Darla's client on El Rancho, so it was already in escrow and it was closing, but she was moving out and she took a bunch of paintings and stuff off the wall and because she didn't want to leave the house looking like that. So I guess it just depends on like the character of the seller.
Right.
too.
Right. Some people care about that stuff and some people are like, I don't-
Yeah, even though she was completely like moving out, like she could have been like, I don't care, but she cared.
So
Now-
do you think it's a good idea as an agent though? Like you go in, the seller's like, well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff to do, but I just don't have the money to it. So you're like, okay, I'll fix all your house and then we can list it.
So you can use that
And then you can change
as a
it.
tactic, right? Like if I'm going to invest money into your house, you better have some language in there that guarantees you're gonna get paid back, some kind of a contract between you and your client, right? Because and I know that some people do that and it's like, okay, that means that when it closes escrow, I'm gonna get paid back. Some people go paid back plus $1,000, paid back plus 10% or whatever, right? There's people that do that as well. And then maybe you're not gonna cancel the listing, like we're gonna get into a longer listing contract. And when you wanna go to cancel it, I'm gonna block it because I have money invested in it. So there's a lot of different reasons why agents might do that. Some of it, like to think of it more full service. This is a more full service. I'm going to charge you a higher commissions rate. There's a lot of reasons, but you got to have the financial backing and the guts to do it. It's scary.
What about, okay, tell me more about that.
So for example, I did it once. I spent $15,000 on a guy's house because remember Stevens Court? You remember Stevens Court? He had a foundation issue, and his foundation, well, it wasn't a foundation issue as much as the soil that was compacted was starting to slip away. So the pillars that held up the roof in the patio cover were moving forward. And so it was an issue with we were in and out of escrow 3 times. And I had to show the same soils engineer report to every buyer. Look, this is the problem. And people backed out. Terry had a guy back out. So finally it was like, look, we're not going to get this house sold unless we fix this issue. And then the seller was like, well, I don't want to dump any more money in this thing. And so I had a contractor come out and $15,000 bid. So I was like, all right, I mean, I think this house will sell. It's a beautiful home. We got to fix this. So I went in, paid to have the work done. You know, then when we closed escrow, I got my commission, but I also got paid back.
So he paid you back.
Yeah, you paid me back because now it was an invoice. I gave it to escrow. I did this work.
Did he say he would pay?
Yeah, absolutely.
He just didn't want
No,
to.
no, yeah, he said he would pay for the work to be done, but he didn't want to pay out of pocket during the listing.
Now,
He didn't
okay,
have the cash before the house was
gotcha.
sold.
Yeah,
But that was discovered in a home inspection.
that was discovered in a home inspection, right? Why are those posts a little bit off? Oh, what else is going on? Well, the soil is moving. So we had a soils engineer come and drill cores and take samples and see the packing wasn't right. So yeah, big
So how
big
is
job.
it gutsy though? Cause you say it's gutsy.
But it was we never sold the house. You know what? So then all of a sudden I'm out. I got $15,000. And even during the so we finish the work. You pay for the work. 2 weeks goes by. We get under contract 30 days. So now I got $15,000 that I need for my business sitting in a house for 45 days. So that's always a little nerve wracking. You're like, please
Can
close.
you put a lien on it? Like if they decide to cancel?
I mean, you could, yeah, you could put a lien on it if they decide to cancel, because you got to have the right kind of paperwork. So I had a contract between he and I. It's very clear what I was going to do, that my scope of work was going to be to pay for this, and he would pay me back. So, but
You
it
have faith in the person.
got to have faith in the person, 100%. Yeah, you got to have faith in the person and faith in the house. Yeah, because it's a big risk. It's a big risk. Okay.
Question, Josh.
Yes, sir.
When a buyer or an inspector says something is not up to code, such as garage door openers are supposed to be battery backup now. But the door works fine.
Yeah, if something isn't up to code, does it have to be lifted up to code? It depends on what the item is that we're talking about. In the case of smoke detectors and water heaters and carbon monoxide detectors, yes,
Right.
they have to be brought up. What about if the plumbing in the bathroom is not low flow? Does that have to be disclosed? Yes. Does it have to be upgraded before you close escrow? Not in our county. Maybe in different counties, but not here in our county. If the staircase has railings that are too wide and a small child could go through them and fall, does that have to be fixed by the time we close escrow? No. It's not up to today's code, but it was up to code when the house was built in 1978. Okay, so you don't have to retrofit in our county. Now, there are some places in California where you do have to get everything up to code. But luckily we're not there. And so that goes back to that section of the contract where there's those 2 little boxes in the grid that say government retrofits. So those would be, in those municipalities, those things have to be done. Kern County, we don't have to do those. So to answer your question, if it's not up to code, you need to just let your buyer know. It doesn't mean that it's broken. It just means, the code changes all the time. Most houses out there aren't up to code because the Title 24 code itself is so drastic and it changes so much every single year that there's no way a house built 10 years ago is going to match the insulation values of that current house today. So what does that mean? You have to rip open all the walls and increase the insulation? You have to go up into the attic and blow more insulation before you sell a house? No, it just means it's not up to today's standards.
Homeowners freak out there. They're like, oh, it's got to be brought to code.
Does not have to be brought to code. So what do we go back to? We go back to paragraph 7B1 of the contract. The house is sold in as is in its current condition, unless otherwise agreed. So again, there's specific parts of the contract, and we'll go back to smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and water heater straps. You're saying right there that the seller, you're going to pay to get those up to code. Okay. Seller to review the request and build a response to the request. So we get a request for repairs. Now it's our job to review it, decide what we're going to do, what we're not going to do. Is it going to harm the transaction? Is the transaction going to keep going forward if I don't do this, or is it going to halt the transaction? And the seller might want to halt the transaction. You know, it just really depends. Terry. Okay, so we're going to get that response over. If repairs are negotiated, we schedule the repairs, we oversee the repairs, we help our seller with the repairs. What else do we need to make sure we get if we're going to do repairs? What do we need to get from the buyer before we start those repairs?
The signed RR, the invoices.
Receipts.
No. What, before we start doing our repairs, what do we want to make sure we get from the buyer? Contingencies. We want all contingencies gone. Why? We want access to that EMD, right? Because if they change their mind and we just got done spending $3,000 on repairs, we want that. We want the EMD, right? This is the worst feeling in the world to have to go to your seller and say, "Oh my God, I'm an idiot. I never removed contingencies. You just got done fixing your house and spent $3,000 and this buyer just canceled and we got to give him his EMD back." Well, that's not a good feeling.
I've had that happen.
You've had that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, horrible,
Yeah, the
right?
agent didn't ask to remove contingencies and just said, oh yeah, we're gonna take care of a few things. Didn't tell me what it was in writing, started doing it, and we ended up canceling because of something else. And
then they got
he
upset.
hit the roof.
Yeah. Well, we just got done paying all this money. Yeah. I mean, we never agreed. We didn't agree to any of this in writing. You telling me, yeah, we'll do this and we'll do that. No, I mean, I got to see it in writing, you know? So, so if repairs are conducted, keep copies of the receipts and documentation and deliver to the buyer's agent.
Who does that?
Okay, so repairs must be completed by when?
Before 5 days before close.
Well, by the time they do their final walkthrough, which can be no sooner than 5 days before close. So if their walkthrough is 2 days before close,
Didn't somebody
2
give us
days.
the verification of property like in the
With the disclosures, yeah, I don't know why they do that. That's, I've had
It's
agents.
just bad TC work.
Yeah, I got it on for Hughes and for Quaker. They send me the VP and the disclosures because we were both representing buyers. Why are you sending me that when it's a form at the top that says this is a form used between?
Yeah.
And there's a couple other stuff too.
Yeah, a lot of crazy.
Like we
stuff out there.
initiate that, not them.
So you just basically having TCs that say my broker is requiring us to get all these forms signed, so we're just gonna sign them all now.
Are they local agents?
Quaker wasn't, right? No.
But you had a
Both
seller whose signature was on the VP already. We
Yeah,
could have wrote anything on the
for
VP.
Quaker.
I mean,
They
you didn't
signed
do
it
this, you
too.
didn't do that, you're gonna still do that, and we could have signed it and it would have been fully executed. It was, you know, it just wasn't smart. It
Yeah, I
wasn't
was
smart.
like, why did they send us?
Okay,
this
so
all the time?
what does paragraph 15 of the contract about repairs say? Repairs must be done in a workmanlike manner. Exact restoration may not be possible due to age of materials and changing materials that are out there. But you got to do it the best that you possibly can. And then it says the seller must provide a list of the repairs, receipts, who did the work, et cetera, to the buyer prior to the close or the final walkthrough. So from our side, we need to get copies of all the receipts. We need to build a little step-by-step, summary of the repairs that we did, who did them, and here's the receipts. We have to deliver those to the buyer. The buyer needs to know. Why does the buyer need to know this information? I'll go ahead, Mariana. You go
What if
first.
it's a new builder and the builder just did it? There's no receipts.
So it was a new build, and yeah, just at least, okay, we did this, just a summary. There aren't going to be any receipts, but in that particular case, the builder's still going to be on the hook for fit and finish for the first year. The reason why we do it in a non-new construction situation, though, is let's say the buyer moves in and 2 weeks later, whatever repair was a defective repair, or it's not holding, or it does something wrong, something defective about it, they need to be able to go back to that contractor that did the work with the receipt, with the warranty, and says, hey, your work's supposed to be warranted for 30 days. You need to come back and fix this.
And be very careful because it's happened to me before when they said they did the work and they didn't do it.
And they didn't do it at all? Yeah.
And it was electrical, so it's like, how would I know?
I'm not electrician.
Looks great, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're getting close to the end of the contract. We want to make sure the buyer and seller have signed all of the escrow closing documents. So what is the seller signing?
Don't they send like
One big thing that the seller needs to sign.
the closing?
No, the seller.
The closing, seller closing?
No. There's one form, one piece of paper
The
that happens
commission.
in the transfer of
CD.
ownership.
The commission.
The deed.
Oh, the deed.
Deed. That's why they're there, to go to the signing. They have to have a notary and they have to sign it and they got to give a thumbprint and the whole thing, right? So they got to sign the deed. So we got to make sure the seller's got their stuff done. The buyer, what does the buyer have to sign?
Loan docs.
Got to sign all their loan docs. So as we're getting close to the end, we want to make sure that, hey, seller, have you signed your documents yet? Awesome, great. Talk to the buyer's agent. Hey, do we have an appointment yet for loan docs? We're going to know, right? Because we're going to want to follow up with the buyer's agent and the lender to make sure that they've got the CD, the closing disclosure. Okay. All of this is happening right about all at the same time. We got the buyer to do the final verification of property 5 days before closing. So how many days? Let's go back to the CD. What is the CD? So the CD is a closing disclosure, the loan closing. What is the closing disclosure? What's on it?
Seller property.
This is for the buyer. It's the buyer side now. The buyer gets the CD from the lender. What is the CD?
Their loan requirements and all the breakdowns.
Yeah, it
of
breaks
everything.
down. It's basically truth in lending again. Okay, we had the one at the beginning of the transaction. This was the estimate. Now we've actually gone into underwriting. We've looked at your credit score. Yeah, your rate's not going to be as good, or maybe your rate's better now. Maybe the market, got better. The rates should be getting better in the next month. So this is the final. This is the disclosure that says, this is how much it's going to cost you for this loan. This is what your rate's going to be. This is what your payment's going to be. We've now factored in homeowners insurance. We factored in property taxes. This is your payment. The buyer must see it, sign it, and then how many days must they wait?
3.
3. They have 3 days to wait before they can sign loan docs. The day that they sign it is day 1.
Why is that so though? Why do they have to wait 3 days?
Because before 2008, when predatory lending was out there, there was no CD. People didn't know what they were signing. They would say, yeah, man, here, I got your loan ready to go. Sign on the line. They would sign it. They didn't see that it was an ARM, an adjustable rate mortgage. They didn't see that they were on an introductory rate that was going to last for 18 months, and then it was going to jump from 3% to 7%. So there was a lot of things that they just didn't, by law, didn't have to disclose. So they call that predatory lending. So after the 2008 financial collapse, when they put the system all back together again, they said, okay, we're going to have a 3-day cooling off period built into every loan so that the buyer, after they sign it, can take it to a financial advisor or to an attorney to read see if there's anything hidden in there, and if they don't like what they see, even though they signed the closing disclosure, they can cancel. They have that 3-day period to back out of the deal before they sign loan docs. So it's just a consumer safety, basically. It's a consumer safety period. Okay, so they get that closing disclosure. They have a 3-day waiting period. So the day they get it, then 2 more days. The 4th day, they can sign loan docs. And then typically, unless we're on a really hurried schedule, we usually sign loan docs on this day, and then we usually send the wire fund and close the following day. So essentially from the CD, you should only have 5 days left, right? So they do a verification of property, sign their CD. We're on the 5-day countdown. Make sure everybody has all their money where it belongs. Make sure escrow has copies of all the invoices from the entire transaction, the NHD, the pest, the septic, whatever other reports, things that are supposed to be paid out of escrow. Because again, you don't want to close that escrow and then a service provider comes back to you and says, hey, we never got paid for this work that we did. And now your seller, who was so happy that they closed escrow, yay, oh, hey, I'm sorry, Bob, here's another invoice for $800. We forgot to put this in escrow. He's going to have a sour taste in his mouth because he's just going to see all that money that just got deposited into his bank and he's got to write a check. So make sure all that invoicing is where it needs to be. Make sure that the lender is funding. Just because they sign their loan docs doesn't necessarily mean that the next day that money is going to be wired. There are conditions that go all the way to funding. And sometimes you will get a CD and sometimes you will sign loan docs, but there's still a condition out there that's a prior to funding condition. So keep in contact with that lender. Hey, are you wiring today? If you're not, why not? What needs to be done? So once that thing gets funded, step 25, we close escrow. And that's what we do. We go, woo. All right, so close escrow. Then, at that point in time, you guys can come up with systems in place to keep track of your clients. Now, so this is us representing a seller. What is something you can do as a tactic when you represent a seller to the new buyer? You just sold the property. Your client moved out. Their client moved in. What can you do to that new client? Yeah. Send them a welcome email. Send them a welcome letter. Send them a welcome gift. What is the possibility, high or low, that buyer's agent may not follow up with them? High. Very high. It's called orphaning a client, right? Because that other agent is going to fall derelict in their follow-up. May never bring them a housewarming gift. May not send them the anniversary card from the anniversary closing. May not send them a Christmas card, but you might. And if you do, you might gain their trust over the agent that they just used. What about if they were fighting with their agent the entire time? And they were like, geez, I'm so glad we closed escrow. Now I don't have to deal with that agent ever again. But geez, this listing agent sure was nice.
You have one of those.
4 years down the road when they're ready to sell, who are they going to call? So you should have a database that not only has your clients and your past clients, it should have the past clients of the other agents that you've worked with.
Oh, darling. Did Maria's Kitchen ever contact you?